Good morning and welcome to Rising. Happy Wednesday. We've got another great show for you today. Niall, I think we wore our wedding singer suits.
We're close to matching.
We're close to matching in a way that I think it's just called clashing.
I think so, but we're trying to make it work.
We'll do our best. All right, let's get to our top story. Kamala Harris promising to end the filibuster in order to protect abortion, earning her the ire of Senator Joe Manchin, the West Virginia centrist, a former Democrat for many decades, but now officially an independent, says that Harris has lost his endorsement given this declaration. The saga began earlier this week when Harris gave an interview to Wisconsin Public Radio. Let's listen.
Here, I think we should eliminate the filibuster for Roe, and we need and get us to the point where 51 votes would be what we need to actually put back in.
Harris has indicated support for ending the filibuster on certain subjects before, including abortion. The filibuster effectively means 60 votes are required to pass laws in the Senate, and it has been used increasingly as a political weapon. But this most recent move invoked Manchin's indignation. He shot back. Let's watch.
Shame on her. She knows that the filibuster is the holy grail of democracy.
You're not going to endorse it?
I'm not endorsing on no. I think that's basically something that can destroy our country, and my country is more important to me than any one person or any one person's ideology.
Getting rid of the filibuster, always a hot topic of debate. So I don't agree with Joe Manchin that the filibuster is necessarily a democracy-enhancing move because it raises the number of votes required to pass legislation. If you're going to pass legislation, you now need to have 60 votes in the Senate, control of the House and the presidency to stop the veto. That is a threshold that very few pieces of legislation can overcome. Obviously, no party has had 60 votes in the Senate since, I believe, Barack Obama briefly had them.
The Obama presidency,
at the start of his term. That seems not likely to happen anytime soon. However, from the Democratic standpoint, I don't know that getting rid of, not that I'm a Democrat or interested in the Democratic Party's health, getting rid of the filibuster right now seems like a bad idea because aren't Republicans very likely to soon control the Senate?
Yeah.
There's a high probability in the next 2 cycles Republicans will gain seats. Their biggest advantage is the Senate map, much more so even than the Electoral College.
Right.
So why would Democrats want to do that now?
I'm not sure, and I think this goes to my main frustration with the debates that go on about the filibuster, which that they always seem so selective. Like in this instance, for example, Kamala Harris is saying, yes, I would do away with it to protect reproductive rights. So there are certain circumstances, in her view, in which a subject reaches sufficient level of importance to do away with the filibuster, and then presumably there are lots of topics when it's not important enough for her to suggest doing away with the filibuster. Now, on the topic of the filibuster itself, I actually would do away with it completely if I was in some omnipotent situation, because to me it is just a increasing block on any progress getting done, and
that's what I like about it.
Well, yeah, but you think the thing about it is it may be a block in that way, but it then freezes up any kind of progress. I think it would be fairer and more democratic with a small d to just say, if you want that party to control the Senate, you vote for them. You want this party, you vote for them. They will have a majority. If they take the White House and the House as well, they can enact their program for government. And if you don't like it, you can vote them out in 4 years' time and have another thing.
I hear that. I mean, what I like about it is that it stops the government from passing a lot of legislation. Usually I don't like the kind of legislation they want to pass.
Do you like any legislation that the government
No, not really.
passes?
They want to spend more of our money, do more regulating, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
However, I will say the problem with our modern era where Congress doesn't do any legislating whatsoever because they can't, because of partisanship and the filibuster, that means that legislating is basically pushed to every other aspect of the government, whereas the federal government is just doing, the executive is just doing a lot of de facto legislation through executive orders, and then through the administrative state, which I very much object to because they're not elected at all.
Right.
There's not any democratic checks on them. And then, of course, the Supreme Court actually doing more and more something akin to legislating. I'm a little bit more defensive of the Supreme Court because I they're of my ideological bent. The majority control is right now, and I tend to agree. I don't always agree. I tend to agree with their decision making. But on the administrative side, particular, it is bad. Now, I don't know that if Congress was doing more legislating, that would actually stop. They'd be legislating, and there'd be tons of rulemaking going on from federal agencies. But their ability to instruct the federal agencies on what to do is thwarted by the fact that the filibuster and other things.
Yeah. So I think where we really disagree here is on broadly the desirability of the government taking action. Like, you're highly skeptical of government action generally, and I'm less so.
The federal government, yes.
Well, my whole point is the country has, for several decades now, faced all sorts of pressing issues that I would argue do actually need some kind of intervention. One kind of an argument as to whether the remedy for those problems is liberal and democratic or conservative and republican. But the danger that I see is the system right now seizes up too easily. And I think not only does that stop people from enacting legislation, it also creates dissatisfaction among a public that just says, why does government not work at all? And I think that one of the reasons is the elected party often cannot enact its program of government.
Let's talk about the politics of Joe Manchin not wanting to endorse Kamala Harris. What do you make of that?
Well, first of all, I don't think Kamala Harris will be too heartbroken. I'm not sure that Joe Manchin brings some massive constituency along with him of Manchinites who are about to follow his endorsement one way or another. Frankly, I think Senator Manchin likes publicity and likes inserting himself into stories sometimes. He is no longer officially a Democrat, as we mentioned in the introduction, so I'm not particularly shocked by it.
Yeah, I think every little bit counts, right? She doesn't want to have, this is a rare voice of dissent from someone ostensibly in her coalition. Ever since she has been coronated the nominee, she's derived almost universal support from not everyone with a D. I know he's not technically a D, but he's on the D side. So it's a little interesting to see some dissent.
Yeah, no, some element of dissent is interesting. I just have always thought, like, Joe Manchin's one of those people who almost everybody in American politics has some reason to dislike. Like, Democrats think that he blocked their agenda by being too moderate, too centrist, and looking after himself too closely. Republicans tend to think he's just, he's a guy who's been a Democrat for decades, so they would prefer to have someone else there.
But he was someone who was capable of getting elected in a Trump state, a massively West Virginia Trump-supporting state, and Kamala, in order to win this election, has to be able to speak to, not all of them, but some subset of otherwise Trump-inclined or not just the Democratic coalition. That just the Democratic coalition might not be enough for her, given that some minority groups are less enthusiastic about her, even than they were about Joe Biden last time around, despite her being a minority and ostensibly being someone who can identify with various progressive aspects of the Democratic coalition. But that is an unproven thing so far. She has to be able to speak to voters in places like West Virginia, Pennsylvania, et cetera. And Joe Manchin was someone who could do that, clearly.
He was, but I just don't think that this particular topic will be the issue that sways,
Well, this topic is a good topic
steel workers outside Pittsburgh are not probably talking about the merits or demerits of the filibuster, right? Yeah. But I do take the point that obviously Harris does have to reach the centre ground of a kind that Manchin was able to win, for good or for bad.
We have more Rising coming up next. Stay tuned.